On June 15th, a clash between India and China on the line of actual control has put the relationship between the two giants into sharp focus. Now, it's been a month exactly since that incident, and as we stand, negotiations are still on between India and China on disengagement. Meanwhile, China has become a cause of concern around the world. Its top technology companies, Huawei are under close scrutiny in the US, in the UK. There are skirmishes over trade with Australia. There are questions about its expansionist designs in the South China Sea. What is the China strategy? And where does the India-China relationship fit into this big picture, especially in a post-coronavirus world? To speak on this, I'm joined by Ambassador Gautam Bambawale. He's former ambassador to China and speaks with us today on the show. Ambassador Bambawale, welcome. Great to have you on ET Now. Let me begin with your take on what we saw on June 15th and the situation a month later. We're still having conversations at Disengagement, and most of the details are not out in the public domain. But is it safe to say that the situation has calmed down from its worst?
Excellent question, Tamanna, and thank you for asking me that question, because I think understanding the geopolitics is very important before you come to the economics of the situation. What has happened this summer on the India-China border, especially in eastern Ladakh, is something which is quite different from earlier episodes which happened in 2013 at a place called Depsang, also in Ladakh, or in 2014 at Chumar, or for that matter, even 2017 in Bhutan at Doklam. This time round, what has happened is that the PLA has come in force with several divisions of troops, and therefore we come to the conclusion that what has happened on the India-China border is something which has been planned by the PLA and the Chinese side. It has been premeditated. It also created, and we fell into this situation on June 15th, where for the first time in 45 years, both Indian troops and Chinese troops lost their lives on the India-China border. Therefore, the question to ask is, what are the Chinese signaling to us, and what have we been signaling back to them? The Chinese have basically been trying to unilaterally determine a boundary between India and China. And as your listeners and viewers know, there is no agreed boundary between the two countries. And they've also been trying to tell us and message to us that, look, China is the number one country in Asia, and you must fall in line. And in return, we have said, no, we will not stand for Chinese bullying or Chinese hegemony. So even though the situation on the ground is de-escalating and disengagement has commenced, I think the largening what will happen in India-China relations.
Okay, is it appropriate, Ambassador, to see this only in the context of India and China? And the dispute over where the border stands, because in that interim there has been a lot of talk and a lot of action that China has taken, which has ticked off other players and other countries in the world as well. I mean, its a decision to impose this national security law on Hong Kong has got everyone on edge. Its action in the South China Seas, its action with Bhutan. So is it appropriate to see this in a larger context?
Yes, you are right. It is appropriate to see it in a larger context of China's aggressiveness all around. It has been aggressive where Hong Kong is concerned, and getting in this new national security law is one aspect of that aggressiveness. It has been aggressive in the Taiwan Straits vis-a-vis Taiwan. It has been aggressive in the South China Seas, and the US is also taking steps and measures against China. It has been aggressive near the Senkaku Islands, which Japan claims. and it has been aggressive on the India-China border. So it's appropriate to see it in a broader light. But what I would like to say is that we also have to decide what India will do. And I think the big message that China has been sending is that it is the number one country in Asia, and others have to fall into line. India has militarily signaled that we do not agree with this. We will not stand for Chinese bullying or Chinese hegemony, and we need to send that message, reiterate it at a policy level. And therefore, I welcome the banning of 59 Chinese apps. I would recommend, and I have recommended to the government of India, that we should
Yes.
also ban Chinese companies from participating in our 5G trials and rollout.
There are some who argue that the border skirmish and military and diplomatic action should be kept separate from commerce and trade. Because they are two very separate things and the considerations are very different, especially looking at India's dependence on Chinese imports, not just in finished goods but in intermediary goods as well. What do you say to that argument, that let's not cut off our nose to spite our face?
Let me tell you one thing, that what we have signaled to China militarily on the ground is that we will stand up and will not tolerate its bullying, pushing around, and hegemony. We need to reiterate that message through our policy decisions, including on the economics of our relationship. Because if we don't do that, we will be making the mistake of signaling to the Chinese that we are okay with what they have done on the ground in Eastern Ladakh. Do you want to send that kind of message? And therefore, I say that all these people who call for a distinction between economics and politics as being absolutely nonsensical. We need to reiterate our message that we will not stand for Chinese bullying by taking steps, including on the economics of our relationship. And I'm afraid that it will lead to a deterioration of India-China relations. But so be it. China has started the ball rolling, and we have to stand up for our rights.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that the economic steps that we are taking are, not easily reversible at all. So even if the relationship between India and China improves, if there is a very clear de-escalation and, the diplomatic and military steps we're taking come to fruition, the ball we have set rolling on Atmanirbharta or on the economic front or cutting down Chinese dependence on Chinese imports is a one-way street. Do you think that this will remain even if things improve in terms of our relationship with China? That paradigm has shifted?
Look, a reset in India-China relations is necessitated by the action that China has started on the ground in the military terms. If we do not send a clear message to China, they will take it in the wrong spirit, thinking that India agrees with what has happened militarily on the ground, where the Chinese have been very aggressive. And therefore, on a national security basis, we need to take such measures, including economic measures. And I don't understand why people think that economic measures need to be painless. In fact, they will be painful, not only for China, but for India also. But once you have made a decision that you have to send these messages on a national security basis, then the economics of it doesn't come in at all. You will have to bear the pain, and you'll have to tighten your belt in order to send that message. So I am very clear that we cannot separate geo-economics from geopolitics. And if we do that, we're sending a wrong signal and a wrong message to China, and that will not stand India in good stead.
A bit of a look back, Ambassador Bambawale. India's dependence on China is not new. It's been increasing over time and our imports have been growing exponentially over time. On the other hand, China's belligerence at the LAC is also not new. Of course, it's not been as aggressive as what happened in Galwan, but it has been known. Do you think that it was a mistake in our minds to separate the two until now? Because we seemed quite happy to continue our economic engagement with China, ramp it up in fact, even while fully knowing what the intentions were politically or on the border.
There is a basic premise in India-China relations that if the rest of the relationship, the economic, the political, the people-to-people relationship is to move ahead, we must maintain peace and tranquility on the border. This has largely been maintained up till this year, the summer of 2020. There has been a big change, and that change was made by China, the Chinese PLA, in the summer of 2020. So till now, we permitted the rest of the relationship to move forward because the border was largely peaceful. This year, the border is not peaceful at all, and there are, as I tried to explain to you, huge troop movements by the Chinese, several divisions of them in Ladakh. And this is a game changer, which we have to understand. And we will have to change the rest of our policies towards China accordingly. There needs to be now a reset or a recalibration of India-China relations, definitely from our side. And there might be a retaliation from the Chinese. We will have to see that, work that out, and then move ahead.
Okay, bigger picture, what is Xi Jinping's game plan looking like? Because right now, China seems to be pretty cornered. The Americans are unhappy with them. UK has put its foot down on Huawei. Australia has sent out a strong message. India, of course, has sent out its own set of messages. What really is the game plan as far as China is concerned? I mean, you've served there, you understand how the political system there works. In your view, what is the agenda?
Look, I'm only guessing at it. If I had known it, I would have shared it with everyone much earlier. But you see, the current leadership of China is very, very aggressive. They do not believe, as Deng Xiaoping used to say in the 1980s, that China should hide her strength and bide her time. They believe that China's time has come. She is the second largest economy in the world. She is a growing military power, and that this is the time when she must take over the world stage, particularly when other countries are still battling with the COVID problem, which incidentally started in Wuhan and should be called the Wuhan virus. So I think it's this very aggressive streak in the current Chinese leadership which is driving this. And perhaps the fact that the rest of the world is still tackling the COVID disease and the COVID pandemic, which has made all of us, both work from home and also economically a little weak. So I think this is a set of circumstances which they may be trying to utilize, but I'm not 100% sure. I think this is what it may be.
I want to talk a bit about China and America and the statement you made also about calling it the Wuhan virus. That's a pretty controversial one, especially in the context of America. So right now, Donald Trump is all about attacking China, targeting China. The question is, will this continue as far as America is concerned post-November? A lot of this rhetoric seems to be part of a pre-election campaign and, in the run-up to the presidential elections. Can we really bet on that equation remaining?
No, we cannot bet 100%, but I think we can bet 90% that there is a consensus in the United States, in both parties, both major parties, that it is time to show China where it gets off and to show China its place. And I think that irrespective of what decision the American people make in their elections in November this year, I think whoever is elected as the President of the United States will continue to tackle China and will continue to see how to deal with China. So I think while it's not 100%, I think 90% we can bet on the United States continuing such policies towards China.
Okay, but what will really make a difference? I think it's time to actually ask that tough question. So far, we've seen some rhetoric from Donald Trump. and some talk about banning TikTok, etc. Of course, the UK action against Huawei is a significant one. India is looking at it more from a point of view, making ourselves self-reliant rather than hurt China, which, looking at our balance of trade, is not going to happen. Meanwhile, in the second quarter, the Chinese GDP is up 3.2%. They seem to be on their way to recovery. So really, what tools do other nations have, considering that as of this moment, China is indeed the factory of the world?
No, I think there are many tools which will hurt China. And let me come back to the point that India should ban Chinese companies from its 5G trials and rollout. Why it will hurt China is because India is a huge potential market for 5G. And when that market closes, as have other markets in the US, the UK, Australia, when it closes for Chinese companies, it is going to make a difference. So I think if you look at trade statistics and trade figures, that's not the right way to analyze it. You must look at what is the potential impact even in the future on Chinese firms. And I think there the rest of the countries, especially the democratic countries, are beginning to see this. They're coming together. And I think India should definitely join other democratic countries, build stronger partnerships with them, and also send very strong signals to China about India not accepting its bullying or its hegemony.
I think that strong signal has gone. It's gone out already. India has sent that out already. It's time to back it with strong action as well. Thank you so much, Ambassador Bambawale, for joining us today.
Thank you, Tamanna.
Well, that's all the time we have this evening on the India development debate, but we'll be back tomorrow with all the big stories that you need to know about, that we need to analyze for you, and of course, all the experts that need to talk to you on those stories. So we'll be back right here tomorrow. Do join us.